For the next 3 days, your greatest conversation will not be with people around you, but with the voice within you. The quality of your life is determined by the words you consistently speak to yourself. Before the world hears you, you hear you. Before others believe in you, you convince you. Most people are not defeated by circumstances. They are defeated by their own unchecked inner dialogue. You wake up every morning and either authorize your purpose or cancel it by what you say to yourself. Your mind is not a playground, it is a command center. Whatever instructions you give it, it obeys. For the next 3 days, you must become intentional about your self-talk. Speak to yourself with authority, not emotion. Speak vision, not fear. Speak identity, not insecurity. Because when you learn to talk to yourself correctly, you will no longer need motivation from the outside. Your spirit will already be aligned on the inside. Every human being lives under the influence of a voice, and that voice is not the one they hear from society, family, enemies, or even friends, but the one that speaks when no one else is present. Long before the world responds to you, your spirit responds to what you say internally. Your life today is not a surprise. It is the result of conversations you have been holding with yourself for years. You did not arrive here accidentally. You talked yourself here. You authorized this version of your life through repetition of thought, belief, and inner speech. The greatest deception is thinking that silence means nothing is happening. Silence is when the most powerful conversations are taking place. When you sit alone, when you walk quietly, when you lie awake at night, something is always speaking. The question is not whether you are talking to yourself, but how you are talking to yourself. Most people allow their inner dialogue to be shaped by past pain, failure, rejection, or fear. They rehearse yesterday while expecting tomorrow to change. But the mind does not change direction without new instruction. Words are not decorations, they are containers. They carry meaning, authority, and direction. When spoken consistently, they form beliefs. When beliefs are formed, actions follow naturally. You do not struggle with discipline, you struggle with identity. Behavior is always trying to obey the strongest voice inside of you. If the inner voice is weak, confused, or defeated, the outer life will reflect the same condition. The mind does not argue with repetition, it submits to it. For 3 days, you are not changing your environment, your job, your relationships, or your circumstances. You are changing the language that governs your identity. You are issuing new commands to your subconscious. You are interrupting old programs that have been running without your permission. Many of the limits you face are not external walls, but internal agreements you made unconsciously through careless self-talk. Every time you say, "I can't," your mind records it as law. Every time you say, "This is just who I am," your potential is reduced to your comfort zone. The mind was designed to obey vision, not fear. But fear speaks louder when vision is silent. The reason many people stay stuck is not because they lack opportunity, but because they have never learned how to speak to themselves with intention and authority. You must understand that your mind is neutral. It does not judge what you feed it. It multiplies whatever it receives. If you feed it doubt, it will produce hesitation. If you feed it clarity, it will produce confidence. If you feed it fear, it will produce avoidance. If you feed it purpose, it will produce direction. The mind is a servant, not a master, but most people allow it to rule them because they never learned how to command it. For 3 days, you are not begging yourself, you are instructing yourself. You are not motivating yourself emotionally. You are aligning yourself intellectually and spiritually. You are not speaking what you feel, you are speaking what you have decided. Feelings are unstable, decisions are powerful. When you speak from decision, your emotions eventually catch up. When you speak from emotion, your life remains inconsistent. Most people wait for evidence before they speak with confidence. But evidence follows speech, it does not precede it. The future responds to authorization. When you speak identity, you are not lying, you are declaring alignment. You are telling your mind where you are going so it can stop dragging you back to where you have been. Memory should be a reference, not a residence. For years, you may have allowed others to name you. Failure named you weak. Rejection named you unworthy. Delay named you unlucky. Pain named you broken. But names carry power, and the one who names controls the narrative. When you talk to yourself correctly, you rename yourself. You take authority back from experiences that were never meant to define you. You stop asking permission to become who you were designed to be. The problem is not that people speak negatively once in a while. The problem is consistency. The mind believes whatever is repeated without challenge. If you have been repeating the same limiting statements for years, it will take intentional interruption to dismantle them. That is why 3 days matter. Not because 3 days are magical, but because repetition is powerful. Focused repetition begins the process of mental realignment. When you wake up, before the world speaks to you, you speak to yourself. You do not check messages before checking your mindset. You do not review problems before reviewing purpose. You speak identity before information. You speak direction before distraction. You remind your mind who is in charge. You declare what kind of person you are becoming, not based on mood, but based on assignment. Your inner voice must shift from commentary to command. Commentary observes circumstances. Command establishes direction. Commentary says, this is hard. Command says, I am built for this. Commentary says, I'm tired. Command says, I manage my energy with wisdom. Commentary says, this always happens to me. Command says, I learn, I adjust, and I move forward. The mind responds differently when spoken to with authority. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who speaks to them. Thoughts arrive uninvited, but they do not have to stay. Self-talk is the filter. Whatever you say out loud or internally gives permission for a thought to remain. If you argue with negative thoughts emotionally, they grow stronger. If you override them with clarity, they lose power. Silence is agreement. Correction is leadership. For 3 days, you stop negotiating with doubt. You stop explaining yourself to fear. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You do not entertain conversations that weaken your resolve. You do not allow your past to speak louder than your purpose. The mind respects firmness. When you speak with certainty, even uncertainty begins to retreat. Many people think confidence is personality-based. It is not. Confidence is information-based. It is knowing who you are, why you exist, and what you are responsible for. When those three are clear, confidence becomes natural. When they are unclear, insecurity dominates. Self-talk is how you clarify those three every day. Identity must be rehearsed, or it will be replaced. Your words to yourself should not be reactive. They should be premeditated. You decide in advance how you will speak when pressure comes. You decide in advance what you will say when fear appears. You decide in advance how you will interpret resistance. Preparation removes panic. When pressure arrives, you do not rise to the occasion. You default to your inner programming. The reason some people collapse under pressure is not because the pressure is too heavy, but because their inner language is too weak. Strength is not the absence of pressure, it is the presence of internal order. Order begins with language. When your words are aligned, your actions follow. When your words are chaotic, your life reflects confusion. For 3 days, you become intentional about every internal statement. You replace vague language with precise language. You replace emotional reactions with deliberate declarations. You do not say, I'll try. You say, I will learn. You do not say, I hope. You say, I am preparing. You do not say, I'm stuck. You say, I'm in transition. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes behavior. You must understand that your subconscious does not understand jokes, sarcasm, or exaggeration. When you say, I'm always failing, it records always. When you say, nothing ever works, it records nothing. When you say, I'm just like this, it records permanence. The subconscious works in absolutes. That is why careless words are dangerous and intentional words are powerful. Talking to yourself correctly does not mean ignoring reality. It means interpreting reality properly. You acknowledge facts without surrendering identity. You recognize challenges without internalizing defeat. You observe weakness without declaring limitation. Reality is a report, not a verdict. Your self-talk determines whether reality becomes temporary information or permanent identity. For 3 days, you are training your mind to serve your purpose instead of sabotaging it. You are shifting from survival language to assignment language. Survival asks, how do I get through this? Assignment asks, what is this preparing me for? Survival focuses on escape. Assignment focuses on development. The words you choose determine which mindset dominates. Most people are exhausted not because they do too much, but because they carry too many internal arguments. They debate themselves all day. They contradict themselves. One moment they believe, the next moment they doubt. That internal division drains energy. Alignment restores strength. When your inner voice is unified, your energy increases without rest. For 3 days, you speak alignment. You speak consistency. You speak clarity. You speak responsibility. You stop blaming circumstances and start instructing your capacity. You stop waiting for motivation and start operating from decision. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start declaring, I grow through process. Growth responds to permission. You were never designed to be driven by emotion alone. Emotion is a signal, not a steering wheel. Self-talk is the steering wheel. When emotion flares, language stabilizes. When fear arises, language redirects. When doubt whispers, language overrides. The strongest person in the room is not the loudest, but the one whose inner voice is settled. For 3 days, you do not allow your mind to wander unattended. A wandering mind will always return to familiar territory, and familiar territory is often fear, regret, or limitation. Direct. Sion requires supervision. You supervise your thoughts by speaking deliberately. You lead yourself the way a leader leads a team, with clarity, firmness, and consistency. You cannot expect your life to change if your internal leadership remains the same. Self-leadership begins with self-communication. If you talk to yourself like a victim, you will live like one. If you talk to yourself like a leader, you will begin to act accordingly. The mind adjusts behavior to match identity statements. For 3 days, you stop disqualifying yourself verbally. You stop reminding yourself of what you lack and start reminding yourself of what you are developing. You stop magnifying mistakes and start extracting lessons. Failure is information, not identity. But if you speak it as identity, your mind will build a lifestyle around it. You are not responsible for every thought that enters your mind, but you are responsible for every thought that stays. Self-talk is the gatekeeper. What you say determines what remains. When you speak truth, lies lose their residence. When you speak clarity, confusion begins to dissolve. When you speak purpose, distractions lose attraction. For 3 days, you speak to yourself before the world speaks to you. You speak to your mind before it speaks to you. You speak direction before reaction, identity before evidence, purpose before pressure, and authority before fear. And as this internal order begins to settle, your decisions begin to align, your focus begins to sharpen, your discipline becomes natural, your confidence stabilizes, and your life starts responding not to chance, not to luck, not to emotion, but to the quiet, consistent, intentional voice within you that has finally been given permission to lead. Words spoken to yourself do not disappear into the air. They settle into the structure of your thinking. Every sentence you repeat internally becomes an instruction, and every instruction becomes a pattern. Your life is not reacting to your wishes, it is responding to your instructions. What you consistently say to yourself is what your mind believes it has permission to create. This is why many people pray for change while verbally reinforcing the very conditions they want to escape. The mind does not wait for confirmation from reality before it obeys language. It accepts words as commands first and then begins searching for evidence to support them. When you speak limitation, the mind looks for reasons to stop. When you speak direction, the mind looks for pathways to move forward. This is not optimism, this is design. Language was never meant to describe life only, it was meant to shape it. Most people speak to themselves casually, without awareness, without responsibility, and without discipline. They talk internally the way they would never talk to someone they respect. They insult their own capacity, question their own worth, and undermine their own progress, then wonder why motivation disappears. The mind cannot build confidence on a foundation of verbal self-sabotage. You cannot expect strength from a system that is constantly being instructed to doubt itself. Every time you say something to yourself, you are either giving permission or withdrawing it. Permission to try, permission to learn, permission to grow, or permission to quit, permission to delay, permission to stay small. Life does not argue with your permissions, it simply follows them. What you allow verbally becomes normal psychologically. What becomes normal psychologically becomes automatic behavior. For 3 days, you are not experimenting with positive language. You are restoring authority. You are reclaiming the right to instruct your own mind. You are shifting from accidental speech to intentional command. You are no longer aloe. Wing your inner dialogue to be shaped by mood, fatigue, or fear. You are speaking from decision, not reaction. Your mind was designed to execute, not debate. Debate happens when instructions are unclear. Confusion is not a lack of intelligence, it is a lack of clear internal direction. When your words are inconsistent, your actions become unstable. When your words are precise, your behavior becomes aligned. Precision in language produces precision in movement. Many people think their problem is discipline, but discipline is the outcome of clarity. When you are clear about who you are and what you're responsible for, discipline becomes natural. When clarity is absent, procrastination fills the gap. Procrastination is not laziness, it is confusion expressed through delay. And confusion often comes from conflicting internal instructions. If one moment you tell yourself you are capable and the next moment you remind yourself of past failures, the mind receives mixed signals. Mixed signals create hesitation. Hesitation creates missed opportunities. Missed opportunities reinforce regret. Regret then becomes the new language and the cycle continues. The cycle only breaks when language changes. For 3 days, you stop speaking hypothetically to yourself. You stop using uncertain language. You stop framing your future in terms of fear. You remove words that weaken authority. You understand that words, like maybe, someday, I'll try, and hopefully sound harmless, but they signal hesitation to the mind. The mind does not move confidently on uncertain instructions. You were not designed to be motivated by pressure alone. Pressure exhausts, purpose energizes, but purpose must be spoken. It must be articulated internally with clarity. When purpose is vague, energy leaks. When purpose is clear, effort becomes sustainable. Self-talk is how purpose stays alive daily, not emotionally, but structurally. Your inner dialogue should not be reactive commentary on circumstances. Circumstances change too often. If your words change every time conditions shift, you will never build momentum. Momentum requires consistency, and consistency begins with stable internal language. You speak who you are becoming even when circumstances disagree. Circumstances eventually submit to sustained instruction. Many people wait until they feel confident before they speak confidently. But confidence is not a feeling, it is a result of alignment. Alignment comes from speaking truth consistently until the mind accepts it as operating reality. You do not wait for confidence to speak, you speak to create confidence. The order matters. The mind believes repetition, not intensity. You do not need dramatic declarations. You need consistent ones. Quiet, firm, repeated instructions are more powerful than emotional outbursts. The subconscious is trained through frequency, not volume. That is why 3 days of intentional self-talk can interrupt years of negative programming. For 3 days, you stop speaking against your own future. You stop predicting failure. You stop rehearsing defeat. You stop telling yourself stories that weaken resolve. You speak progress, not perfection. You speak learning, not limitation. You speak movement, not paralysis. The mind responds immediately when resistance is removed. You must understand that your words create mental pictures. When you say this is impossible, the mind sees walls. When you say this is challenging, the mind sees effort. When you say, I am not ready, the mind delays. When you say, I am preparing, the mind engages. Language directs imagination, and imagination influences action. Most people underestimate the creative power of imagination because they never direct it. Their imagination is hijacked by fear-based language. Fear does not originate in circumstances, it originates in images formed by unchecked words. When you change your language, you change the images. When the images change, behavior adjusts naturally. 3 days, you speak to yourself before pressure speaks to you. You establish your narrative early. You decide how you will interpret resistance. You decide how you will respond to delay. You decide how you will speak when results are slow. This removes emotional instability. Preparation stabilizes performance. You are not denying difficulty, you are denying defeat the right to speak first. You acknowledge effort without labeling yourself weak. You recognize learning curves without declaring incompetence. Growth requires permission to be imperfect without being discouraged. Your self-talk determines whether mistakes become teachers or prisons. The reason some people grow rapidly is not because they avoid mistakes, but because their language processes mistakes efficiently. They speak correction instead of condemnation. They speak adjustment instead of judgment. They speak learning instead of labeling. Their inner dialogue keeps them moving while others stay emotionally stuck. For 3 days, you become aware that every complaint is an instruction. Complaints train the mind to look for problems. Gratitude trains the mind to look for solutions. Responsibility trains the mind to look for options. Victim language trains the mind to wait. Leader language trains the mind to act. You cannot speak helplessness internally and expect empowerment externally. Empowerment begins with ownership, and ownership begins with language. When you say, I am responsible, the mind searches for capacity. When you say, this is not my fault, the mind waits for rescue. Language decides posture. Your words to yourself should create posture, not pressure. Pressure comes from unrealistic expectations. Posture comes from clear identity. When identity is spoken daily, pressure decreases because direction is clear. You stop forcing outcomes and start managing process. Process responds better to instruction than outcome obsession. For 3 days, you stop measuring yourself by comparison. Comparison distorts language. It makes you speak from insecurity instead of assignment. You were not designed to replicate someone else's journey. You were designed to complete your own. Self-talk must reflect responsibility, not rivalry. The mind performs best when it knows its role. Confusion about role leads to frustration. Frustration leads to negative self-talk. Negative self-talk leads to disengagement. Disengagement leads to stagnation. Clear internal instruction reverses the cycle. When the mind knows its assignment, it commits fully. You are always one internal decision away from a new pattern. That decision is communicated through words. Until the words change, the pattern remains. Patterns are loyal to language. They do not break through wishing, they break through reprogramming. Reprogramming begins with deliberate speech. For 3 days, you speak to yourself like a builder, not a critic. Critics point out flaws without solutions. Builders acknowledge flaws while continuing construction. Your life is under construction. Speak accordingly. Construction language produces progress. Condemnation language produces abandonment. You must understand that silence is not neutral. Silence allows old programs to keep running. If you do not give new instructions, the mind defaults to familiar ones. Familiar does not mean healthy, it means repeated. Repetition without evaluation is how limitation becomes tradition. For 3 days, you interrupt tradition. You question internal habits. You replace inherited language with intentional language. You stop speaking what you were told and start speaking what you have decided. Decision is the beginning of leadership, and leadership always starts inward. When your words to yourself change, your reactions change. When reactions change, relationships change. When relationships change, environments change. When environments change, outcomes change. But it all begins with the quiet, consistent instructions you give yourself when no one else is listening. Alignment does not begin when circumstances improve. Alignment begins when identity is spoken before evidence appears. Most people wait for confirmation before they commit internally, but commitment was never designed to follow proof. Proof follows commitment. The future responds to clarity, not hesitation. When you speak who you are becoming before results appear, you are not pretending, you are positioning. Identity is not discovered through observation alone. It is established through declaration. What you repeatedly say about yourself becomes the framework through which you interpret everything else. If your identity is unclear, every opportunity feels confusing. If your identity is clear, even obstacles feel purposeful. The difference is not intelligence or talent, it is internal alignment. Many people confuse humility with silence. Silence does not create humility. It creates vulnerability to external definition. If you do not define yourself, life will assign you labels based on performance, mistakes, or opinions. Those labels will then shape how you speak to yourself, and how you speak to yourself will determine how you show up. Identity must be spoken intentionally, or it will be shaped accidentally. For 3 days, you are not speaking what you see, you are speaking what you are aligning with. Vision was never meant to be a reaction to reality. It was meant to be a guide for reality. When you speak identity before evidence, you give your mind a destination. Without a destination, effort becomes exhausting. Direction gives meaning to strain. Your mind is constantly asking one question: who am I in this situation? The answer you provide determines your response. If you answer with fear, you retreat. If you answer with insecurity, you hesitate. If you answer with clarity, you engage. Identity answers questions before emotions do. That is why stable identity produces stable behavior. Most internal conflict exists because identity and language are misaligned. People say they want growth but speak comfort. They say they want change but speak fear. They say they want discipline but speak exhaustion. The mind cannot pursue two opposing instructions at the same time. Alignment occurs when words and desired direction agree. For 3 days, you stop identifying yourself by temporary states. You are not your mood. You are not your fatigue. You are not your mistakes. You are not your delays. Those are conditions, not definitions. When you speak conditions as identity, you trap yourself psychologically. When you speak identity above conditions, you give yourself room to move. Identity spoken consistently becomes reference, and reference becomes reflex. When pressure comes, you do not stop to decide who you are, you respond automatically. That automatic response is not accidental, it is trained through repetition. This is why intentional self-talk matters before crisis arrives. Preparation is invisible until it is needed. You were never designed to negotiate your worth daily. Worth is not situational. Worth is foundational. When worth is questioned internally, energy leaks into validation seeking. Validation seeking weakens focus. Focus weakens progress. Progress weakens confidence. The cycle reverses when worth is settled through clear internal language. For 3 days, you speak worth without apology. Not arrogance, but certainty. Certainty that you have responsibility. Certainty that you have capacity. Certainty that you are accountable for growth. This kind of certainty does not make you reckless, it makes you steady. Steady people outlast emotional ones. Identity spoken before evidence requires patience because results may not appear immediately. But patience is easier when identity is clear. You do not panic when growth is slow if you are convinced of direction. You do not quit during silence if you are aligned internally. Internal alignment reduces external anxiety. Many people abandon process because they speak identity only when outcomes agree. When outcomes delay, identity collapses. This creates emotional instability. Stability comes from deciding who you are independent of results. Results then become feedback, not confirmation of worth. For 3 days, you speak identity every morning before activity. You remind your mind of its assignment. You define your role before the world attempts to redefine it. You choose language that reflects responsibility, not entitlement. Responsibility strengthens identity, entitlement weakens it. Identity spoken correctly removes comparison. When you know who you are responsible to be, you stop competing with people who are on different assignments. Comparison confuses language. Confused language weakens direction. Clear identity produces contentment without complacency. You must understand that alignment is not emotional excitement, it is internal order. Order allows energy to flow efficiently. Disorder drains energy. When your words are aligned with purpose, effort feels lighter even when work is heavy. When words contradict purpose, even small tasks feel exhausting. For 3 days, you stop speaking labels that no longer serve your direction. You stop calling yourself broken when you are learning. You stop calling yourself late when you are in preparation. You stop calling yourself weak when you are in development. Language either accelerates growth or delays it. Identity spoken before evidence also trains patience with others. When you are secure internally, you do not need constant external affirmation. You listen better. You respond calmly. You lead quietly. Leadership presence is the byproduct of internal alignment, not volume or dominance. The reason some people appear naturally confident is not because they lack doubt, but because doubt is not allowed to define identity. Doubt visits everyone. Identity decides who stays. When identity is strong, doubt becomes a signal to refocus, not a reason to retreat. For 3 days, you treat your inner voice like a leader addressing a team. You are firm, not harsh, clear, not emotional, consistent, not dramatic. Leadership language creates trust even internally. When your mind trusts your direction, resistance decreases. You were designed to live from purpose, not pressure. Pressure speaks urgency without clarity. Purpose speaks direction with patience. When you speak purpose internally, pressure loses control. You still work hard, but without panic. You move forward without rushing your development. Identity spoken before evidence also strengthens decision-making. Decisions become easier when identity is clear. You do not debate options that contradict your assignment. You do not entertain distractions that pull you off course. Clarity simplifies life. For 3 days, you stop asking if you are capable and start asking how you will grow. Capability grows with use. Identity gives permission to use what you have now. Waiting to feel ready delays progress. Alignment creates readiness through action. Your inner language should not fluctuate with praise or criticism. Praise does not define you. Criticism does not dismantle you. Identity stabilizes you. Stability is attractive. Opportunities respond to stable people be. Because stability communicates reliability. For 3 days, you speak to yourself as someone in process, not someone waiting for permission. You give yourself authority to learn, to adjust, to improve. Authority removes hesitation. Hesitation wastes time. Time responds to clarity. When identity is spoken daily, fear loses its grip. Fear feeds on uncertainty. Certainty starves fear. You do not need to eliminate fear, you need to outgrow it. Growth begins with language that points forward. For 3 days, you align your words with where you are going, not where you have been. The past becomes information, not identity. Experience becomes wisdom, not limitation. Wisdom speaks calmly and moves steadily. Alignment does not announce itself loudly. It settles quietly. Decisions become simpler. Focus becomes sharper. Discipline becomes natural. Confidence becomes steady. And all of it begins with the words you choose to speak to yourself before evidence ever arrives.